All right, so my name is Jeff Hermesch. I am the Ag and Natural Resources Extension Educator in Decatur County, Indiana. So if you're familiar with Greensburg, we have the tower tree growing out of our house. So that would be our claim to fame there. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about fall lawn care tips. Just a few things before we get started. Tom kind of covered a little bit of that. Just if you could, if you're not muted, go ahead and mute yourself. That way we keep out the background noise. I will share with you that I have two little kids that are running around my office, so you may, and questions you can put into the group chat. We will get to those. We can kind of go through them as they're typed in there, or we can wait till the end. Either way, it doesn't matter to me. We'll just go about it that way. I am going to take my video off. If you want to take yours off as well, sometimes that does help just with the bandwidth and all that good stuff. So with that, I will go ahead and get started on our fall lawn care tips. All right, so with fall lawn care, we're going to focus strictly on cool season turf. The reason that we're going to do that is because here in Indiana and really throughout the Midwest, cool season turf is what dominates our lawns. You'll have some warm season grasses here and there in the transition zone. If you get a little further south in Indiana and into Kentucky, you'll see some warm season grasses, but we're going to focus primarily on cool season turf. So we'll just get started with that. What is cool season turf? We'll kind of go over just some of the basics here real quick. You're talking about Kentucky bluegrass, perennial ryegrass, tall fescue, fine fescues. Most likely in your yard, you probably have a mixture of all of these if you don't know for sure. If you have seeded your lawn, then you would have an idea of what you do have, but any of those are going to work in Indiana. They all have some good and bad about each one of them. Most likely in Indiana anymore, we're going to recommend tall fescue. And we're not talking about the old clumpy wide bladed tall fescue, but we're talking about the newer stuff. It's called turf type tall fescue. More often than not, when I'm recommending grass seed to someone, that is typically what I'm going to go with. It is more drought resistant and disease resistant. It seems to thrive a little bit better during our warm summers. So the turf type tall fescue is probably my #1 recommendation. Kentucky bluegrass is still pretty decent. Perennial ryegrass is going to be one that germinates very quickly and will fill in, but it does get a lot of different diseases, so it's not as recommended. And then your fine fescue, if you have areas that have shade, at least partial shade, the fine fescues are going to work a lot better in there. If you do have a very heavily shaded area, none of these are going to work very well. So you may be looking at different options. So we'll move on from there. If you're not sure what you have in your yard, Purdue, the turf grass science department, which I use quite often, they have an identification tool that you can go through and kind of figure out what you may have in your yard. If, again, you go through that and you have no idea, you can always send pictures to me. I can help out with that as well. My background is in turf grass science, so I have a degree from Purdue in that, and spent the first part of my career working in minor league baseball and college athletics, managing athletic fields. So definitely can help you out with that. So as far going a little bit further into the grasses that you may have in your yard, we're going to talk about bunch type versus spreading grasses. So before I told you that the turf type tall fescue is what I would recommend for your yard. The one downfall to turf type tall fescue is that is a bunch type grass. So it doesn't fill in, it doesn't spread and fill in your yard very quickly. It does take some time to do that. When you are totally renovating a lawn or a turf area, you're probably looking at a year to almost 18 months for that to really fill in if you're using turf type tall fescue. So that's a bunch type grass. It just grows more in clumps, along with perennial ryegrass and the fine fescues. So if you have a yard that is a bunch type grass and you need to do renovations, a lot of times you do have to overseed those because they won't fill in. On the other hand, spreading grasses, like your Kentucky bluegrass, and then you do have creeping bent grass on there, but that's going to be used just for your golf greens and tees. So that's not something that we're going to focus on. But Kentucky bluegrass is one that will spread pretty rapidly in your yard. It will fill in on its own, and it's not something that you always have to reseed if you have some thin areas. But you can have a mixture of these. You could have the Kentucky bluegrass and you could have turf type tall fescue. That would work just fine. That's not a bad combination because you do have the bunch type versus the spreading grasses. So as far as the grass cycle goes, this is kind of important just because we are going to talk and focus more on what to do during the fall, but just kind of give you an idea and some pictures here of what that grass cycle looks like. So in the winter, you're basically not going to be doing much to your lawn. It's going to go dormant. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just the way our cool season grasses work. So not much going on in the winter. It will retain some color, but nothing you're going to have to do there. In the springtime, as you can see from the picture, that's when you're going to have rapid growth and greening of your lawn. You're probably going to be mowing once, twice, maybe 3 times a week, depending on how much fertilizer you're putting out in your yard. So springtime is one of those that a lot of times people will fertilize heavily then, and really what you'll see tonight as we go through this, the fall is when you're going to want to do that. In the summer, as you can see again from the pictures, you may have a yard that goes dormant if it's dry. Right now here, at least in Greensburg, we've had a lot of rain recently, so my yard went from looking pretty crispy to now I'm going to have to mow probably a couple times this week just because it's growing so much. But again, in the summer, our cool season grasses, if it is very dry and we have droughty conditions, most likely it's going to go dormant, and that is just the plants protecting themselves. So there's nothing wrong with that. And then in the fall, that is, again, that's why we're here tonight. That's why we're going to talk about and focus on what to do in the fall. You're going to have root development going on, and this is just the time that your lawn is going to recover from those summer stresses. And so you're really going to do a lot of your maintenance in the fall. So we're talking September, October, and November. So we're just going to go through, some of the basics. Some of this you probably already know, and some of it may just be a good refresher, but we're just going to talk about how you are going to take care of your cool season grasses. So first and foremost, we'll talk about mowing. Now this may seem, very basic, and really it is, but there's some key things that unfortunately a lot of people are missing. And I will say, when I get calls and I got to go out and take a look at people's lawns, probably more often than not, the first issue is mowing height. And typically people mow way too short, or they're not mowing enough. So you can see here for our cool season grasses, your mowing height should be somewhere around 3 inches. I will say you could have a range of 2.5 to 3.5. I mow mine at 3.5. That's, it helps crowd out the weeds and just promotes a healthier lawn. So our cool season grasses really don't tolerate shorter mowing heights. Now, if you had a warm season grass like Bermuda grass, you'd be able to mow that at 1 inch. or so. They tolerate those low mowings, but for our cool season grasses, again, keep it somewhere around 3 inches. That's going to be ideal. The other thing is you don't want to take more than 1/3 of the leaf area off. So it's the 1/3 rule. We'll get into that a little bit more with the next couple slides. You know, in the springtime when we have a lot of rain and the lawn's growing pretty quickly, this rule gets broken quite often. Sometimes it's just, you know, you can't help it. It's too wet to get out there and mow. And by the time you do it, you're taking off quite a bit of leaf area. So like I said, we'll get into that in the next couple slides. The next thing is you want to return your clippings to your lawn. I don't see as many people anymore that have the vacuum systems that collect the clippings, or even with their push mowers, the bag that collects them. I don't see that quite as often. So that's a good thing. By returning those clippings to your lawn, you're actually returning, you know, through a year's time, basically 1 pound of nitrogen for every 1,000 square feet. So that's a good thing. Nitrogen is what we typically focus on for our lawns. And so by returning the clippings, you're getting free nitrogen. A couple other things, you know, mowing when the grass is dry. I will say I was guilty of mowing when it was wet the other day. I had been out for a few days on vacation and my lawn was pretty wet, but it needed mowed, and I got out there and did it, which meant that I had to spray my mower off and lift it up and clean out the deck and take care of that. So it's a lot easier to mow when the grass is dry. Now on the flip side, you see that last point there, when the grass is under stress. So before we had all this rain, my lawn was pretty crispy, and so I backed off and I was not mowing because there was nothing to do. And while I love mowing, and you know, that's something relaxing to me, there's no point in going out and doing that recreational mowing just to do it. So going back to that 1/3 rule, you can see just a couple visuals here. We call this scalping when you take off more than 1/3 of that leaf area. And so what happens is you have a lawn that just, it looks unhealthy, and it really is. By taking that much leaf area off, you're putting the plants under a lot of stress. And so you can see on that picture to the left that there's a lot of browning going on in those leaf blades. So that's what will happen whenever you take off more than 1/3 of that area. And then the picture to the right, obviously when you take off more than you should, you end up with piles of clippings everywhere, and then that's going to cause more issues if you just let them lay there. So that is an instance when I would say you definitely want to rake those up or spread them out, or take a leaf blower out there and just move them around, because that's going to cause issues as well. As far, again, as the 1/3 rule, you can see here, this is how much you should mow, determined by that 1/3 rule. So as I said before, your mowing height should be somewhere around 3 inches. So this gives you a good guideline to, you know, when should I mow again, and then how often should I be mowing. So if you look at the 3 inches for your mowing height and just go across, you can see that ideally you're going to mow when your grass is 4.5 inches tall. Now, are you going to get out there with a ruler and measure that? Probably not, but you have a good idea of when you need to go out there again. So you're going to take off 1.5 inches of that leaf blade. So that's the 1/3 rule. So basically, estimated, you know, you're going to mow basically once a week at 3 inches. So that's pretty typical for, you know, the springtime when it's growing. Summer, it may back off just because of, you know, drought conditions or things like that. And then it'll probably pick back up again in the fall. So you can see the shorter you mow, the more often you're going to have to mow. So I know growing up, that was one thing that I grew up, my dad just, he mowed very short, and it seemed like we always mowed the grass, and just, you know, he's gotten better about that over the years, and I've convinced him to mow higher, and he likes the results. Not only is he mowing less often, but his weeds are in check better than what they were. Something that's often overlooked is just simply checking your mowing height. So that is something that, you know, I suggest you do every once in a while. It's always good to check that, whether you have a push mower or a riding mower. You know, issues that may arise is, you know, the deck could be out of alignment possibly. The setting, you know, maybe you have a mower that tells you what setting it is and how high it should be. You know, double check it and make sure that that setting is actually correct, and do it on a flat surface. So a driveway would be, you know, or a garage would be perfect for that. Another thing to think about, just because this happened out of personal experience, is even, you know, checking that and making sure that everything is level, because sometimes tires can lose air pressure. And so that happened in an instance where a couple tires lost air pressure on one side, and the mower was just mowing kind of at an angle and very odd. So that was one thing to kind of figure out. So the correlation between mowing heights and your root system, you can see here, this is a Kentucky bluegrass, and this is a very old picture, but it's used all the time, and it's one of those that stands true over time. So mowing, you know, very short, your root system is going to be very shallow, and then that's going to end up causing all kinds of issues, whether you know, it's disease or pests, or, you know, in a drought condition, again, your grass is going to dry up a lot quicker if you're mowing short. So mowing at that 3-inch range, again, is going to promote a better root system that is going to chase water down through your soil profile. Some other things, again, just to kind of wrap up, you know, the basics of mowing here is keep your blades sharp. I've had people in the past, and, you know, it's you know, neither here nor there, but people that have not realized that you should sharpen your blades. You know, that's probably something throughout the mowing season. I would say changing your mower blades anywhere from 3 to 6 times is probably a good idea. You can sharpen those at home. You can take them to local lawn care businesses or dealerships, things like that, and they'll sharpen them for you. It's not that costly to do, but you can really tell a difference when your blades are sharp. You see the couple pictures there, that top one, you know, or at least if you look closely enough and pay enough attention to your lawn, when your blades do get sharp, you'll just see that that green color kind of goes away, and you've got more of a brownish color right on those the tips of the leaf blades. And that's just, those mower blades they're still cutting, but they're kind of beating those blades to death, basically. So you want to keep those sharp. You also want to mow in different directions. That's one thing. Again, striping kits are very nice on lawn mowers. You know, they make for a very attractive looking lawn having stripes in there, but mowing in that same direction time after time is just going to cause all kinds of issues with compaction. It'll actually lay your grass over, and eventually you won't even really be cutting anything. So you definitely want to switch that up, you know, on a weekly basis, mow in different directions. But you can see there the comparison, leaf A, B, C, and D. Obviously, A is what you're looking for. It's a nice clean cut. That's most likely with a rotary type mower, which is what most of us are going to use. You do have reel type mowers, which you'll see on golf courses, you know, ball fields, things like that. They're nice. They're a lot of maintenance. You're constantly sharpening the blades on those, unless you have the old school reel type that you just push. Typically, you're going to have a rotary type mower. So again, as you go through there, you just see the difference between B, C, and D, and you can read the different injuries there. But basically, just reiterating the point that you need to keep your blades sharpened. Do that 3 to 6 times throughout the mowing season. So we'll move on. Some other things to think about here in the fall. most likely, most people that I deal with do not have irrigation. So that's not something that I cover very often. But one thing that I like this picture up on the top is the footprinting. So if you're not sure if your lawn needs watered, take a walk. And if you see those footprints, then it probably needs, a splash of water. How much does it need? Well, typically you need about an inch of water per week. Now, we don't want to do that lightly over 5 to 7 days. Basically, that inch of water for an established yard, you would want to do in probably 2 days, maybe 3 days max. But for a established yard, deep and infrequent irrigation is the best. So again, footprinting is kind of the, not the most scientific method of going out and seeing if your lawn needs water, but it works. So if you see the footprints, give it some water. If it bounces right back up, then it's probably okay. Going into the automatic irrigation systems just a little bit here. They are very efficient. They're very nice. You can have a lawn that's green all year long. Some things to think about if you're going to put one of those in, or if you have one currently, know how to use them. Go through the instruction manual and make sure you know how to change the settings. Don't have it set up the very first time it's installed and then just let it go and have it run the same time all the time. Basically just familiarize yourself with it. And obviously, pay attention to the weather, because a lot of times you drive around and you'll see, maybe a local business that has an irrigation system and it's running while it's pouring rain. So just make sure, again, just some common sense things there, but you can see that the best time to water is going to be very early in the morning. So 4 a.m., up to 8 a.m. in the morning. And you can see why. Water pressure is usually the highest, especially, if you're on some sort of city water, municipal water. It's going to be best during that time. Wind is going to be, again, this is most of the time, your wind pattern or the pattern of the water is not going to be affected as much by wind during that early morning. Your amount of loss as far as evaporation is not going to be a whole lot during that time frame. So, you want to avoid those middle of the day waterings unless you just absolutely have some areas that are looking really dry. When I worked in baseball, we would call those hot spots. So every once in a while during a hot, 90 to 100 degree day, we would walk around the field with a fire hose and just water specific spots that maybe were looking, looking a little hot. So, and then that 4 to 8 a.m. is going to give you less disease pressure. So if you water late at night and that water just sits on the leaf blades overnight, all that does is, especially during the summer months when it's humid, is going to create an environment that diseases are going to love. And then chances are you're going to promote those, and then you could wipe your lawn out. So again, if you don't have an irrigation system, not a big deal. Cool season lawns are going to go dormant during the summer, and again, that's just their way of protecting themselves. So not something to worry about. So the big thing that I want to focus on, let me go back, is during the fall, this is where you're really going to figure out your fertilization. This is the key. So fertilization in the fall, this is where basically 2/3 of your nitrogen is going to happen. Typically, you're going to put down nitrogen in September, October, and November. Some people, we'll go through kind of a schedule here. You can go out in May and put some out. You're kind of always, it's a roll of the dice there, weather-wise, if you should or not. But typically, if you're going to fertilize and you want a lawn that is going to be lush and green and get rid of weeds and just look nice, then definitely take advantage of September, October, and November and get that fertilizer out there. So you can see that those late summer and fall fertilizations do all kinds of wonderful things for our cool season turf grasses. They help with recovery, they choke out the weeds, they help prepare the turf for winter, helps with root growth, and it's just the time, you know, with the grass cycle, it's just the time to do it. So with established yards, you're looking mainly at nitrogen. We'll go through some examples here with some fertilizer bags, but the first number on your fertilizer bag is going to be your nitrogen. So that's going to be your green color, and your overall growth is going to come from that nutrient. So that's really the only thing we're going to be concerned with an established yard. Now, the other two numbers on the bag are going to be your phosphorus and potassium. They're still important. We want to shy away from going too crazy with those. Phosphorus can cause some issues, but in a situation where maybe we are establishing a new lawn, or you're overseeding your lawn, or maybe there's an area that needs reseeded, then you want to focus on what we call a starter fertilizer, and that's going to have more phosphorus in it because it does help with root and stem growth. So it's important when establishing a new lawn, but first, for ones that are already established, nitrogen is the key. So this comes from one of our publications on fertilizing cool season lawns. So when you go to the store and you've got all these different choices of fertilizers, sometimes it can be very difficult to figure out what exactly do I need? What do all these things mean? So if you do go to the Purdue Turf website and you look through the publications and find the one on fertilizing cool season lawns, I believe this chart will be in there. This is a great thing to take with you. It's a nice little cheat sheet. You can see over there on the side, basically for our fall fertilizations, we recommend that you use products that have both quick and slow release fertilizers in them. So if you want to compare the two, quick release is going to be something obviously that is used very rapidly. It is cheaper. It's water soluble. So you can see in there urea. That is one. I will use a product in November, somewhere around, let's say November, Thanksgiving timeframe. I'll use a product that is actually 4600. So it is just straight nitrogen, and it's urea nitrogen. At that time of the year, it's okay to use because it's not going to burn your lawn. If you were to use that, say during the summer or spring or something like that, you definitely would probably burn your lawn up and have issues. So the slow release products, they're not as available. It's more of a controlled release, so they will last over several weeks, or even a month, maybe 2 months possibly. So you can see there's all kinds of different ones there. There's a lot of different coated ureas, and you also have, if you're looking more for an organic or natural way of taking care of your lawn, you can see here that you have your organics. So poultry manure, corn gluten, malorganite, things like that. Great products. When I worked in minor league baseball, we used a product that was made out of poultry manure. It worked very well. The only issue that you have, obviously, when using a organic product like a poultry manure is going to be the smell. So if you have neighbors close by and you use these organic products, you might be a good neighbor, give them a heads up that they might smell that until it gets watered in, but they do work very well. The thing about your natural or organic products is that they are going to cost more than your other products. Malorganite is something that I've used, and that is actually sewer sludge that has been made into a fertilizer. Again, works very well. Great product. Just, you know, something I thought I'd mention in case you were wondering what that may be. But this is a great cheat sheet to kind of figure out when you go to the store, what does all this mean? Is it quick or is it slow? So again, as far as timing goes, we've kind of already covered this. But again, it's something that I think is important to know. You can see there that basically you've got two different windows, and that September, October, and November time frame is going to be the most important, with September being the #1 time you should fertilize. So with fertilization, you know, it's kind of a double-edged sword. If you fertilize, you know, in the fall 3 different times, your yard's going to look great, but you're going to be mowing more often. And for some people, that's not what they want. So you kind of have to determine what you want your yard to look like. So if you want it to be the best looking yard in the neighborhood, you're probably going to be fertilizing September, October, November, and maybe even in May, possibly. That could be your 3rd application, or it could be a 4th, depending on, you know, what you want to do there. If you're not as concerned about some weeds and you don't really care if it's the best looking lawn in the neighborhood, but you want it to at least look decent, then maybe you only go with the September fertilization. So that's one thing that in talking with people, I always want to get their expectations of what they want their yard to look like, because what I want mine to look like compared to what you may want could be totally different. A lot of times anymore, depending on where I'm presenting and who I'm talking to, some people could care less about what their lawn looks like as far as the grass. They want to promote different types of what I would call weeds, because they're trying to promote pollinators. So again, fertilization is going to be the biggest change that you're going to make in your lawn as far as getting rid of weeds and promoting a healthier lawn. So you got to kind of figure out how much you want to do there. So as far as how much fertilizer should you use, the rule of thumb, as you can see, is that you never want to fertilize more than 1 pound of nitrogen for every 1,000 square feet. So in September, you're going to put out 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. You're going to do the same in October. You're going to do the same in November, and you're going to do the same in May, possibly. Now, the one in May, you can see you might dial it back a little bit and go a half rate or 3/4 rate, something like that, because in the spring, you don't really need to promote that flush of green growth, because again, the grass cycle, it's going to be doing that on its own. So again, you're looking at that. If you add all that up, you're going to be fertilizing. If you go all out and fertilize, you know, September, October, November, and even in May, you're looking somewhere between 3.5 to 4 pounds of nitrogen for the entire year, which really in the whole scheme of things is not that much. That is one thing. If you hire a professional lawn or landscape company to come out and take care of that for you, you might ask and see what kind of rates they're going at. And because I've seen areas in the past where they may have been putting out way too much, and then that's just bad for the environment. I've seen issues in neighborhoods that have had retention ponds, and then they end up having different types of weeds form in the ponds, and that causes issues. And it's just been because it's been runoff of nutrients into those ponds. So you don't need a whole lot of fertilizer to really make a difference in your lawn. So again, as far as what you need to know, as far as how much should you use, you need to know the size of your actual lawn area. And that's something quite often that's overlooked. Some people will just go out, they'll buy a bag and they'll spread it till it's gone. I would not recommend that. So get out, walk your lawn off, figure it out that way. You can always go online and check out your local GIS website. I know I use that quite a bit when people call me and maybe they don't necessarily live close to me, but they're wondering how much fertilizer to use in their lawn. I'll ask them for their address. I'll find their local GIS mapping system website and throw that in there, and I can calculate what their lawn area is. That's the key right there, is just knowing what that is. The next thing that you're going to need to know is just the actual fertilizer analysis. So we covered this a few slides ago, but if you look at the picture there, that bag of fertilizer is 29% nitrogen, 3% phosphorus, and 4% potassium. So that's a pretty typical analysis. Pretty much you're looking for a 4:1:2 ratio with that nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. That's pretty typical. Again, you're looking for a product that has both quick and slow release nitrogen in it. The only exception would probably be the one in November. You could get by with just putting a quick release fertilizer out because you want the plants to take that in, and then it just stores it for the winter, and then it gets that kickstart in the spring. So again, know your lawn area, know how big it is, take out the driveway, take out the house, any buildings or anything like that, take all of that out of the calculation and just know what the lawn area is. You'll be kind of surprised at how much you take out and maybe how much you save on fertilizer products. And then obviously, depending on what products you use is going to determine how much fertilizer you're going to use. So we're going to go through a quick calculation, and that'll kind of give you an idea of what this looks like. So on this slide, again, how much fertilizer to use. This product here, doesn't matter what the brand name is, it's just happened to be a Scott's product. So if you look, it says it is a 32-0-10, so 32% nitrogen. That's really the only thing we're concerned about at this point. With an established lawn, nitrogen is the key. So if you look at that top calculation, basically your nitrogen rate is always going to be, should be 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. Most likely your lawn is going to be bigger than 1,000 square feet. It may be 1,000 square feet. If it is, you're lucky. It's, that's going to be an easily manageable lawn, but typically we're talking much, much bigger than that. So, so the other thing you need to know again is your total lawn area. So in this example here, we're just going to say that this is a 5,000 square foot lawn. So basically, you're just going across there. It's 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet for a 5,000 square foot lawn. So as you go through the calculation, you're just multiplying across and then dividing. So it's going to come out, you're just taking 15.6 pounds of fertilizer is what you're actually going to use for that yard. So you may buy a 50-pound bag of fertilizer, and if you do the calculation here, you're actually only going to be using 16 pounds of that fertilizer bag. So that bag is going to last you for a few applications. And that's the nice thing. Once you have this stuff dialed in and you know what size your yard is, you can do this easy calculation here. You're going to be able to save some money and not waste fertilizer and possibly put nutrients into places where they shouldn't be. Now, if you don't like math, makes your head hurt, there is the turf fertilizer calculator. You can find this on the Purdue Turf website. So this will give you an idea. You can compare fertilizers. You can calculate what you need. If you know the cost of the bags, it'll tell you how much it's going to cost you to put an application out on your lawn. So again, if you don't necessarily like to do this calculation here, which is not difficult, but if you want to double check things, just go to the Purdue Turf Fertilizer Calculator, and that'll help you figure out how much you should actually use. So moving along with fertilizer, the next thing really is just what type of spreader should you use? And so really, in my mind, the only type of fertilizer spreader that you should use is going to be the rotary type of spreader, which is going to be the one on the left. And you can see the distribution there in the middle. What the rotary spreader allows is it allows for some operator error. So not a bad thing. You can overlap too much or maybe not overlap enough, and you're really not going to notice a whole lot with using a rotary type of spreader. Now, if you use the drop spreader, which is on the right, that one is going to leave the fertilizer lay in a straight path in between those tires. And you have to be pretty darn good to walk a straight line for an entire yard and make sure you don't overlap or just get it, right spot on. So the drop type is just not something that I would use for fertilization. It does work well if you're going to seed your yard. That's not a bad method to use the drop spreader, but for fertilization, stick with the rotary type. And it doesn't matter. You can buy some really expensive ones. You can buy some really cheap ones. I have a pretty cheap one myself, and it works just fine. So one of the questions then that we get quite often is the spreader settings. So what should I put it on? And that's going to really depend on quite a bit. So it might depend on the fertilizer product itself. As you buy different products, you'll notice the size of the granules are going to be different depending on what the product is. It could be just the spreader that you're using. Some are going to be different. It just may be the brand name, the difference between how they manufacture those. You're going to have recommendations on there. And while that's a good place to start, if you calibrate and do things properly, you may find out that the recommendations don't always line up and match with what you're supposed to do. And then the other thing too is merely just your walking speed. So some of us walk faster, some walk slower, which just means that you may put more product out or you may put less depending on your walking speed. So the best way to go about figuring out what setting should I put my spreader on is going to be calibrating your spreader. That's going to be the most accurate way to determine. Again, you could go off of the recommended settings on the bags, and it's probably in most cases going to be very close, but you may find out it's not. So how do you calibrate? This is not the most scientific method. I will tell you that right now. You can go on YouTube and you can search for spreader calibration through University Extension. I think maybe Texas A&M has a really good video out there. It goes into a lot more detail and shows you, spells it out if you're a visual learner. I like the video myself, but we're not going to show that here. So to calibrate your fertilizer spreader for your lawn, really, it's pretty simple. Again, it's going to allow you to kind of play around with this and maybe you make some mistakes, but typically in this, you're not gonna have anything that's too crazy. So what you need to do, because you are fertilizing, when you go through your calculations, you're always doing a pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. So you need to measure out 1,000 square feet in your lawn. If you're worried about messing up, maybe do it in the backyard where no one's going to see, but measure that out, flag it off or whatever you need to do, put some spray paint down or whatever, but make sure you mark out 1,000 square feet. So you go through your calculation and you figure out how much fertilizer you're going to need for 1,000 square feet. So maybe it's 3 pounds of fertilizer for that 1,000 square feet. So add 3 pounds to the fertilizer hopper. Pick pick a setting, all right? Pick one in the middle if you want. You know, or if you have a recommendation from the bag, go with the recommendation. But go out there with that setting and go ahead and fertilize that 1,000 square feet. And then hopefully, you know, your setting is spot on and you don't have to do anything, but maybe you run out too quickly and then you know the setting is wrong. Maybe you have way too much left when you get through the 1,000 square feet. And then again, you know, you have the wrong settings. So just basically reweigh the fertilizer remaining and just kind of see where you're at. And then you can just adjust the settings from there. Again, not the most scientific way of doing it, but it's a great way to calibrate, figure out what setting you should be putting it on. And then the nice thing, or at least what I would do, is keep a notebook, record keeping, even, you know, with fertilizer applications for your lawn. I think it's crucial because if you use the same products year after year, knowing what setting to put that on is key, that you won't have to go out and calibrate this thing every single time. So just keep a record, you know, somewhere in the garage or wherever, but put that down, and that way you won't have to do this again. Because, you know, mistakes can happen. You can put too much out, not enough. So calibration is key when doing this. So just some things that we have seen over the years. These, you know, we've seen all kinds of crazy stuff, but fertilizing your lawn, you know, typically you're, you know, not going to be a big deal. We don't see a whole lot of mistakes, but here's just 3 of them that, you know, are a little more on the crazy side. So you can see the picture on the left. There's really no rhyme or reason as to what they did here. So definitely not a good method. You can see that they did spill some fertilizer in areas and actually burnt those areas. It's going to be a while before those are actually going to have any grass come back, even with reseeding. So be very careful when fertilizing on any type of slope that you don't spill fertilizer. You can see the picture towards the right. That is one where someone just went out with a bucket and just did it by hand. Again, not very accurate. You're going to have a lot better accuracy using that rotary spreader. And then the picture in the middle, basically you can just see some of the areas that you kind of see light green and then darker green stripes in there, and they just didn't quite get the overlapping down on those. So just be careful when fertilizing, because, you know, things like that can happen, but hopefully they don't. Again, the key to everything we talk about tonight, if you want to improve your lawn, is to fertilize. September, October, November. That's really going to make a huge difference. So we'll move on. The next thing that you can do in the fall that is going to have huge benefits for your lawn is going to be aerification. So this is something that you can hire. Lawn care companies will come out and do this. You can go and rent aerators from local tool rental places. You can go and buy your own aerator. I have one that is just ground driven that pulls behind my lawnmower, adds some concrete blocks to it to weigh it down. And basically what you're looking for is, there are 2 different types. There's ones that are called solid tine, and they just poke holes in the ground, which is fine. It's not bad. But then, as you can see in the pictures here, there's aerifiers that are called core aerifiers, and they will actually pull plugs out of the ground. And that's the preferred method, is to pull the plugs like that. There's nothing you have to do with the plugs. They will eventually, you'll either chop them up when you mow, or Mother Nature will take care of them through rain. But you can see all the benefits there. This is kind of one of those where you do it and your lawn looks like it really took a beating and you're wondering, why did I do that? But in the end, if that's something you continue to do every fall, and you could even do this in the spring as well, you know, a couple times a year would be great, but definitely do it in the fall once. It helps with thatch and compaction. It also is going to help stimulate root growth. It basically lets your lawn breathe It'll help your roots chase water because the infiltration will get deeper into that soil profile. It will help if you have some wet areas that maybe are compacted. Again, it helps with fertility response. You could possibly, if you have some soils that are not so great, like mine is quite a bit of clay and not necessarily the greatest thing for lawns, but you know, if I wanted to go in and aerate and then top dress it with some sort of organic matter or compost and then, you know, incorporate that, that would help as well. And it's also something that if you have some, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, if you have some renovation products or projects for the fall, this will help tremendously with overseeding and getting seed to soil contact. So in the fall and really again in the spring, you want to do this when it's kind of that fine line. It can be too wet or too dry. If it's too wet, you're going to have a muddy mess on your hands. If it's too dry, you're not really going to pull any cores out. You may get a ½ inch to an inch, and that really doesn't do a whole lot. So you want to get 2 to 3 inches deep. You really cannot over aerify. You can go in several directions and just keep aerifying it. Again, it might look like you're beating your lawn up at the beginning, but the benefits over time are going to be tremendous. One thing that we do get questions about quite a bit is rolling lawns. And if you have a lawn like mine that is a heavy clay lawn, I would avoid rolling those. I know that throughout the winter, your soil is going to heave up and down, or maybe you have issues with moles. You know, if you have to roll certain areas, maybe you have to, but I would definitely, after you roll it, I would go out with an aerator and aerate that just to loosen things back up. But if you want to avoid the rolling altogether, probably the best bet. Aeration will actually help, you know, with those areas that are heaving up and down. So this might be a practice that is often overlooked, but definitely one that I would suggest. So we have a publication, again, on the Turf website that goes through some different lawn improvement programs. And I could probably spend, you know, hours going over basically the 3 different steps that or 3 different programs that you could go through. So I just kind of highlighted things from those publications. You can find that on the Purdue Turf website, and I'll have that link at the end. But it kind of depends on, you know, if you're looking to improve your lawn, definitely, you know, we're getting to the middle of August, so you're looking, you know, anytime really, August 15th to September 15th, and you could creep back to the beginning of October, but this is where you really want to start thinking about, you know, some sort of improvement program. And so it depends on your yard. So if you have a lawn that, you know, it looks pretty decent, there is, you know, you've got some weeds in there, but, you know, it's mostly turf grass, then this is probably the easiest one because you can just improve your lawn through fertilization and weed control. So we kind of covered most of this already, but this improvement program, basically you're going to fertilize, you know, in September with a product, again, that's kind of a 4:1 to 2 ratio. So mostly nitrogen, probably a quick and slow release nitrogen. You're going to go out at that pound per 1,000 square feet. You're going to do the same thing again in October with the same exact product, the same exact rate. And then a third application in November, probably, you know, around that Thanksgiving time frame. And you're going to use a product that has quick release nitrogen, like a urea. And again, a pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. So everything we've already talked about, you know, you're going to do those 3 things. That's your fertilization. The thing that you're going to add in there is you're going to put a broadleaf weed herbicide application probably somewhere in the month of October. That's going to depend on Mother Nature, obviously, but typically you'll see, it's very common, you'll see broadleaf weed herbicides that'll contain 3 active ingredients, and you can see them listed there on that last bullet. And that would be 2,4-D, Mecaprop, which is also MCPP, and dicamba. So it's just a 3-way combination of active ingredients, and that will take care of most of your broadleaf weeds. There are going to be some, you can see listed there, your wild violets and clover. They may need something a little bit stronger, and we'll get into that just in a little bit. But typically, 1 application in mid-October of a broadleaf weed herbicide. You may look, there's all kinds of different brand names. One of the most common out there is Trimec, you know, but there are, you can get any kind of brand name and it's going to work as long as it has those ingredients in it. So that's the easy way to improve your lawn. If it just, you know, is lacking a little bit, maybe has a little more weeds in there than you want, that's lawn improvement program number 1. Pretty easy and straightforward. So improvement program number 2, this might be, you know, maybe you've got more weeds in there than you actually have turf grass. So you're going to go a little different route here, or maybe you're just trying to thicken it up. Maybe it's looking a little thin. So you can do this through overseeding. So for cool season grasses, we talked about at the very beginning, 3 inches is where you need to mow. This is the one time I will tell you it's okay to mow as low as you can. So step 1 through overseeding is going to be mow that as low as your mower deck will go. So 1.5 inches. So basically you're keeping out the competition from established grasses or weeds by mowing that low. So mow it first, short as it will go. Aerify it. This again, just aerify. Just keep going over it. You're not going to overdo it. You want to create as much seed to soil contact as possible. The next thing is you're going to want to add a starter fertilizer. So this is going to be different than the other fertilizers that you're using. This is the one, that middle number, your phosphorus, is actually going to have the highest percentage. So it'll say clearly on the bags it's a starter fertilizer, but you're going to want to put that out at a rate of 1 pound, maybe a little bit more, but you're going to calculate that for phosphorus for every 1,000 square feet and not nitrogen. So the calculation really is no different. You're just swapping out nitrogen for phosphorus. And again, you can use the fertilizer calculator on the turf website if you want to. So you're going to apply that starter fertilizer onto the yard, and then you're going to go out with a drop spreader and put the seed out there, or you're going to use a power overseeder, also called a slit seeder. You can rent those from tool rental stores. But basically, you want to make sure that you make at least 2 passes over the lawn in different directions, up to 4 passes. That way you have uniform seeding. So again, don't put it all out, you know, in one direction. You want to make sure you do it at least 2, 3, 4 times. The key here is going to be watering. Then you're going to want to water that seeded area probably 3 to 4 times daily. Basically just keeping the soil surface moist. You don't want to water deep. So this is the opposite from your established lawns. New lawns or overseeding, you're going to do light and frequent. So the first few weeks, you're going to be watering quite a bit. Now, if you don't have that capability, then again, you're just relying on Mother Nature there. Mowing. Lots of people will let their new seedlings get 3, 4, or 5 inches tall before they ever mow, and that's a mistake. Make sure that once they get to, basically you get to 1.5 inches or so. You want to cut the lawn at that low mowing height at least a couple times, and then you can just raise it up a 1/2 inch over the next few weeks until you get to where you want it to be, so 3 inches or so. But don't be afraid to go out there and mow pretty quickly, really. That'll help promote new growth. Then 4 weeks after you germinate the seed, you're gonna apply a pound of nitrogen. You're gonna go back to just your normal, 4:1 to 2 ratio. Hopefully you're doing all of this in the, mid-August to mid-September timeframe. That way you can fertilize again in October and then maybe fertilize again in November. But as far as weed control, things like that, we always say that your newly seeded lawn, or if you're overseeding, you want to make sure that you've mowed that probably 4 to 6 times before you put out any kind of weed control. So hopefully your timing works out all right, that you can still make that mid-October broadleaf weed control. The key here is, and you're not going to worry about this in the fall, but crabgrass preventer, if you were to seed in the spring, if you put crabgrass preventer down, you're also preventing your grass seed from growing. So the good thing is we're talking about fall time here, so you don't have to worry about that. So lawn improvement program number 3, which is the one I'm very familiar with. I'll show you some pictures here on the next few slides. Complete renovation. So I've had some yards in the past with houses that I've owned that were just full of weeds, really nothing good about them. So this is where you go in and you start all over. So you apply a non-selective herbicide like glyphosate, which would be Roundup to a lot of people, and you spray the entire yard to kill it off. It may take multiple applications to do that, so wait a few days before you start doing anything else, because you may have to go out and make another application. So once you've killed the yard off with that non-selective herbicide, you have 3 options depending on what your soil is like. If it's uncompacted soil, then you can just aerify, and then you can go through the rest of the steps like we talked about before. If it's compacted soils, then you're probably going to have to till that up and till it for 2 to 4 inches. You're going to have to rake it and get that grade back where it should be, allow it to settle for a week or 2. That might be with irrigation, it may be with Mother Nature and rain. Then you would slightly compact it with tractor wheels or lawnmower wheels or whatever it may be, and then you rake it, smooth it out again, put your seed down, starter fertilizer, all that stuff, exactly what we talked about before. If you have a lawn that has a lot of thatch, which we haven't covered, but if your lawn feels real spongy, then, which typically in Indiana on our lawns, we don't have thatch as an issue, just because the lawn would have to be really heavily fertilized to create thatch. But if you do have that, they make these machines called power rakes that will basically remove as much thatch as possible. And basically you can go in there, use that, and then you could use a sod cutter to cut the thatch out, or you could just rotary till all of it in. Again, kind of depends on your soil situation there on what you might do. But as far as the rest of the steps of the renovation, exactly the same as what we said before. Starter fertilizer, this one you would rake lightly just to get the seed and the soil to come in contact. You're going to water again very frequently and lightly for the first few weeks. You're going to mow it as soon as those new blades reach 2 inches. Don't be afraid to do that, even if it's really thin. You still want to mow. After your 4 or 5 mowings, and you're going to go back to that permanent 3 to 4 inches. And then again, get on that fertilization schedule, applying that pound of nitrogen for every 1,000 square feet in October and November as well. And then hopefully, if timing works out and you do all of this in September, by mid-October, you can do your broadleaf weed spray as well. So here, just to kind of show you that, this can be done, and these are the steps real quickly. This is what I did with previous home that I owned. So starting from the top left, the yard kind of was all over the place. There were some sections that I overseeded to see what it would look like, and that's the green at the bottom of that first picture in the top that looks pretty decent, but then you had areas that were just full of weeds that I finally decided it just wasn't worth trying to revive through any method besides complete renovation. So that middle picture on the top is spraying with a Roundup product, glyphosate. So did have to go back in and control some tougher weeds and just spot spray those, but that killed everything off. The top right is just tilling. Went in a couple different directions. You want to make sure you don't over till on those. You want to make sure it's not too wet. You don't want to turn it into a powder either. So we did till 3 to 4 inches. And then the bottom left is just several times of going over with kind of a homemade drag that went behind my mower. I used a piece of chain link fence to kind of smooth all that out. You can see then moving over to the right, just my grass seed, and then you can see the fertilizer there. That is a starter fertilizer. You can see the middle number, that phosphorus is a higher percentage, so that's what I used. And then I did use a drop spreader. It took quite a while to do that, but it worked out all right. And then the picture on the very bottom right, that's my daughter helping spread straw. The key there is a bale of straw for every 1,000 square feet. You want to see about 50% of the soil when you put that straw down. Straw is inexpensive and it works really well as a mulch for those grass seeds, but a lot of times people will put way too much down and then the seeds never see the light of day and won't germinate. So just be careful not to put too much. You can see some other things here, just kind of go through. You can see basically the bottom 2 pictures, that was 6 weeks after complete renovation. I had a nice thick lawn. I did mow 2 weeks. I think it was 2 weeks after I seeded. I was lucky enough that Mother Nature cooperated and I got some nice rains because I did not have any type of irrigation set up there. But you can see in a month and a half, you go from nothing to a pretty nice looking lawn. So some other things then to think about during the fall months are going to be weed management. So if you're doing your mowing correctly, if you're aerating, correctly, if you're fertilizing correctly, your weed management will take care of itself to a point. So you can see all these different good management practices. We've talked about most of those things. If you're following all of that stuff and doing those right, we can eliminate herbicides or at least overuse of them. So that's one thing I like to really key in on is if you're doing everything else right, you don't have to have that silver bullet and what can I spray to kill this. A lot of times you'll take care of it. If you just have some patience and get on a good program, you'll be able to take care of it over time. So basically the weeds that we're going to talk about, in the fall, there's different categories here, but we'll talk about a few of them. I'll show you some pictures, but we've got summer annuals, winter annuals, biennials, and perennials. The summer annuals at this point in time are too mature for you to really do anything with. They'll die once we get a frost. So there's really no point in August to go out and try to do anything with them. So in winter, we're talking about that mid-October timeframe. that's when we're going to key in and try to take care of those winter annual weeds. And then the perennial weeds, you know, they're around all the time, so we'll take care of those with a fall application and then even a spring application. So some ones that you may find familiar, winter annual weeds that'll start to germinate here as we get into the fall. But you'll see you've got annual bluegrass, which quite honestly is pretty tough to control, and a lot of people, you may not even realize it's there. It's more of it's a lighter green. It'll go to seed head quicker than your other grasses, but most people will tolerate that. But you'll see purple dead nettle, henbit, chickweed. Those are pretty common, and they're pretty easily controlled. Perennial weeds that you'll see and want to try to control, and I'll be honest, most of these are pretty tough. Well, ground ivy, your plantains, the wild violet, and the white clover, those are going to be on the tougher side to control. Dandelions, although they may be numerous, they're actually pretty easy to control. So you need to know what you're actually identifying. So there's a lot of keys there, because you might need to know, you know, can I use a pre-emergent or a post-emergent spray? You know, what kind of product should I be using? What time should I be putting it out? Things like that. So if you don't know what the weeds are in your lawn, you can always contact your local extension office. You know, you can send pictures, you can drop off samples, things like that. We can help you with that. So as far as post-emergent herbicides, basically, you know, there's a lot of different active ingredients here that you're looking at. But if you look at that box over to the right, pretty much what you're looking for with most of your broadleaf weeds in the fall, whether they're winter annual or perennials, the combination of 2,4-D, mecaprop, and dicamba, which I said before is Trimec or many other brand names, that's going to take care of most of them. In the instance you have a ground ivy or white clover or wild violet, something like that, then you're probably going to have to use a product that contains the active ingredient triclopyr. And you can find products that have triclopyr added in to the 2,4-D, mecaprop, and dicamba. So that's really the key there. Those products there are going to take care of most of your broadleaf weeds. So as far as your post-emergent herbicide use, you just want to make sure that you're getting these weeds when they're small. So spraying in the middle of October is key for those winter annuals. The liquids are going to work a lot better than your granules. Read the directions. I cannot stress that enough. You know, some people will put things out in the middle of the summer and wonder why they didn't work, and it might be because it was, you know, the temperatures were way too extreme. So just make sure, you know, read the label, basically, is what this slide is talking about. You know, sometimes we do have failure, and that could be because you didn't identify the weed properly, which means maybe you used the wrong product. Maybe you didn't use the right rate. You know, and the rates are there for a reason. Don't add more to it just because you think a little bit's good or a lot more is going to be better. That's not the case. So definitely stick with those recommendations. You know, it could be the wrong timing. Again, maybe you sprayed it when it was too big. Maybe it was too hot outside, too dry, things like that. Here's just a few examples. There definitely are way more out there. There's tons of products. But you can see the two pictures on the left. This one is your basic, it has 2,4-D, mecaprop, and dicamba. You know, good for most of your broadleaf weeds. The one in the middle has triclopyr in it, so this would be for the weeds that are a little more difficult to control. And then again, you can see the picture on the right, 2,4-D, dicamba, things like that. So just read the labels and make sure you know what you're looking for. This is something, you know, kind of moving from the broadleaf weed control to grassy weeds. These are tough. We'll just be honest. You know, you can see there's all kinds of different weeds that may happen in cool season turf. The one that I dealt with and decided just to completely get rid of was nimblewill. It's a warm season grass. It looks much like Bermuda grass. It's very aggressive, tough to get rid of. So I used glyphosate. You can see glyphosate is an option for all those, but it kills everything. You can see there are some options for that are selective. So for nimblewill, I could have used a product called Tenacity. And that may be an option, you know, price wise. I think for me, that's where it got me. I didn't want to spend that much money on that product. And I had so much of it in my lawn that it just made more sense to start over. So the grassy weeds, pretty much you either live with it or you kill everything off and start over. Or you could spot, if it's just located in one area, you could spot spray those areas and kill it and then reseed it. But there are new products that are being developed, but we're still kind of, you know, not a lot out there. You know, going back to organic ways with your lawn, you know, there are organic fertilizers that work very well, and I definitely would recommend those. Weed control is another kind of, it's just not something that we're not really there yet. The organic alternatives, as you can see a couple down here, they just don't work as well as our conventional herbicides. They will damage the grasses in your lawn. They're more expensive. You'll probably have to spray multiple times to get rid of them. So just not something that you know, works very well at this point. But if you want to go that route, there are products out there. We do get questions a lot about, you know, homemade products using you know, soap and vinegar and Epsom salts and things like that. Unfortunately, you know, there's no research out there that is, you know, that we can pinpoint to say, yes, those things work. So they're not labeled as, you know, herbicides. So those things are just, you know, not something that we're ever going to recommend. Moving on, another topic and kind of our last topic as far as things to do in the fall would be moles. If you have mole issues in your yard, you know, good luck. I apologize. It's going to be time and patience to be able to take care of these little guys. The thing that people kind of, there's a misconception is people think that if you have moles, then you must have a grub problem. And that's definitely not the case. Earthworms are going to be the main food source for your moles. So you definitely don't want to get rid of earthworms. So not much you can do there. Moles are going to be active both in the spring and the fall. So, you know, during the summer months, they'll burrow down and you don't really see any of their surface tunnels. And that's where people think, oh, well, I got rid of them in the spring. And, you know, that's just not the case. They're going to be active both spring and fall. They reproduce in February and March. So spring control is actually probably better, but obviously, you know, just depends. You can do both. Home remedies, there's a lot of different things out there that I've heard. Castor beans, chewed up bubble gum. You know, I could go on and on about all kinds of different home remedies, but avoid those. There really is only two options. You can see those on the screen there, the pictures. You have different types of traps. You have harpoon traps. There are some other ones out there as well, but trapping works well. It just takes time and patience, and you're probably going to have to move those around quite a bit. And just because you got one doesn't mean there's how many more in there. So you'll be very, very patient with that. And then the other option are mole baits. They look like earthworms. They do work. They have poison in them. So a couple things about those, you know, since they do have poison, and if you have pets, obviously that can be an issue. You definitely don't want to use those if your pets dig in your yard. The other thing with the mole baits, when using those, obviously read the directions like you would anything else, but you want to handle those with gloves, because if you get your scent on those, when you bury those into those tunnels, the moles are going to smell your scent, and then they're not going to go after it. So, you know, trapping I like because you have evidence that, you know, you took care of it. The mole baits work. It's just you never really know because you don't see the evidence. So, so that's kind of the fall tips for cool season grasses. There's a lot of different things that we covered there. Tried to get through it, you know, fairly quickly. You could take any of those specific topics and talk all night on them probably, and go into a lot more detail. If you're looking for some of those publications, this is what you're looking for right here, Purdue Turf. You can go through, you can see up there at the top of that website, the calculators. There's different things on there that you might use for fertilizer or seed, things like that. It's got plenty of resources, publications, a lot of the different things I pulled from there. You know, just want to say special thanks to Dr. Aaron Patton, who you saw on the previous slide. A lot of the information comes from him, and then John Orrick, who is our Master Gardener Coordinator. Got some of the information from him as well. With that, this, you can see a little bit of my, this is my hobby, definitely. So minor league baseball, college athletics, this is something that, that I did for a few years before I got into this role. So if you have, you know, questions after the fact, my contact information is there. You can find me, reach me through email or give me a call. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I'm going to stop sharing my presentation here at the moment and open it up to any questions.
I was just going to say, Jeff, I didn't record any that were in the chats, but like you just said, if someone does have a question, put it down there in the chat for us, or go ahead and unmute your mic and just ask it.
This is Judy. For fall, can you look like Scott's fall fertilizer and then Scott's winter fertilizer?
Yeah, I think that's, there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, Scott's has the, you know, different steps, and it's one of the, you know, I mean, I'm probably more of a bargain shopper, and I just buy, I buy what's on sale, and I'm not too concerned about brand name, but Scott's definitely makes it more, you know, user friendly to have those different steps. So yeah, I would say that both of those
Fertilizer for dummies, basically.
Yeah,
for Scott.
I mean, for lack of better words, yes, that's what they have, and there's nothing wrong with that stuff. I've used it myself, and yeah, it's good stuff. So
yeah, I'm a bargain shopper too. So
yep,
right.
I just try to find what's on sale, but yep, the Scott stuff is good.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Jeff?
Thanks, Jeff. Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, Robert says a pretty thorough presentation, Jeff, and I would agree. Again, we do want to thank you for that. Jeff's info is there at the bottom of that. So if you have other questions, just let him know, or any of the other extension offices there in your counties can maybe assist you as well, or get that message on to Jeff.
All right.
So
thank you, everyone.
And everyone have a good evening. I guess we should mention last week we'll wrap up the series, or next week I should say, with Dave Osborne and Aquatic Control out of Seymour. We're going to be talking on pond management. So maybe see some of y'all join us again next Wednesday night. Thank you.
All right, thanks.